Hey everybody, Rob from Karma Comment Chameleon coming at you with a couple of entitled parent stories. First one up, my old best friend's entitled mother ended our friendship. Let's jump right in. This happened a few years ago, back in 2016, and I had been best friends with another student since the 8th grade, 10th grade when this happened. For some background information, I have Asperger's, so my social skills aren't the best. Anxiety, stress, etc. I've gotten a lot better since then, but I'm far from normal. I sat at the lunch table with him since 6th or 7th grade, but didn't really start talking to him until 8th grade. We were both the silent type, that is, until we got to know each other. Hell, we'd never shut up. So in 10th grade, we had study hall, or resource room as they called it, together, then lunch right after. It was around April when I started to notice that more and more my friend was being moved to the back of the room, specifically to be separated from me during resource room. Neither of us really did homework then, and I mostly played games and or worked on some game dev stuff for fun. If he did have work to do, I would mostly leave him alone until he was done. Like I said, my social skills weren't the best, so every once in a while I'd try to talk to him but not say much before stopping myself. I didn't think much of it at first, but being paranoid, I thought they were deliberately trying to separate him from me. In the end, I was right, so I wasn't very happy about it, but what could I do? So we still talked, but mostly during lunch. Now, when we talk, I usually tend to be much more dominant in the conversation than he is. This becomes important later, but he didn't seem to mind. Now, I wish I could say there was some sort of a build-up to this whole thing, but there wasn't. One day, I went up to his locker before class started. His locker was on the way to my first class, so I got a chance to talk to him then too. I said hello, and he didn't respond. I said hello again, to no avail. I was confused. He'd never ignored me before, never been angry or upset with me. I then said, "What's wrong?" He turned around to me and said, "My mom says I'm not allowed to talk to you anymore." My heart dropped. I was confused, heartbroken, angry. I saw absolutely no reason for this to happen. I stood back for a second and then angrily slammed his locker shut and walked away to my next class. I sat quietly through class and didn't say a word. Head down, I could have cried. Towards the end of class, I asked to go to the nurse. I did this somewhat often. When I was upset and or stressed about something, I'd say that my stomach hurt and I'd go to the nurse and ask to go home. My mom was very well aware of this and would almost always pick me up if I asked. Once I got into the car, I told her what happened. She was as equally confused as I was. I should mention, I never interacted with his mother once. We only really talked during school, and I only ever met her a few times. She did not seem like the type of person who would do this. She was aware of how good friends we were, and she knew how much he meant to me. I was about to transfer to another school for my behavioral issues, code for the teachers and staff were absolutely done dealing with me. I originally protested because I wanted to stay there, even though I hated it, just to stay with my friend. After that, I was much more okay with transferring, which, might I add, was an absolutely amazing school full of people who gave a shit about your problems. And I didn't go to school until the transfer about a week and a half. I didn't say anything to them for the whole summer until the first day of 11th grade. I went to CTEC, Careers and Technical Education, and how the busing worked was that I'd take the bus from my school to the CTEC, then take the district bus back to my old school, where I'd get on a different bus to go home. On this different bus, lo and behold, I was waiting for the bus to leave and my friend gets on the bus. He had the same bus home as I did, which didn't make sense. I lived close to the school and he lived as far away from it as possible without leaving the district. He jumped a little when he saw me, but he didn't say anything. He just walked to his seat and stayed quiet until I got home. I cried that afternoon, and when my mother got home, I told her what happened. She decided that after a summer to let any situation diffuse, I should nicely email her and see if we could be friends again. I had her email, so I emailed her very nicely asking to be friends with him again and apologized for any issues I may have caused. Dear OP, this year, friend has a full schedule and is focusing on getting good grades so that he can get into the college of his choice. I thank you for your apology, but I have forbidden friend to talk to you due to the problems that were caused last year. I understand what you are saying, but friend is still having anxiety issues about this. You scared him, and I don't want that to happen again. Please do not blame friend for this. I am protecting my son. I'm sure that you will find other friends. Thank you again for your apology. On one hand, I can see where she's coming from, but on the other hand, there was some BS in that email. First, I never scared him. Unless he was really good at hiding his emotions, he never had a problem with me. Second, I doubt that I was impeding his ability to study and make it into college, considering he still had quite a few other friends. Third, I found I'm sure that you will find other friends to be a bit insensitive, especially considering that saying that bothered me more, especially considering that he was my only friend. After that, my mom emailed her and got a similar response. I don't have that email, and the memory is kind of foggy about it, but she basically said that he didn't have time for friends as he was going to be far too busy with school and looking into colleges. Again, BS. I've seen him talking to other friends on the bus, defending what she said and that I'd find more friends. So as it turns out, he was entirely responsible for having us separated at school and even wanted us separated during lunch. But that didn't end up happening, but definitely would have. She BS'd the school, saying that I was following him and harassing him, practically bullying him and not allowing him to do his work. Of course, she was a teacher at the middle school, so they would just do what she said and believe her. In terms of me being connected with him now, not much. He created a Twitter account somewhat recently in which he's responded to 2 of my tweets and I've retweeted his. The only reason I found his was because he was in my contacts and it recommended that I follow him. I just hope that one day soon he escapes his controlling mother's grasp and we can truly reunite one day. I sincerely hope that those two get to be friends again. Now on to our second story and our title story, how my broken arm led to my parents' divorce. Let's jump right in. First time poster on this subreddit. Apologies in advance for the length, but this is a doozy. Also, this happened a long time ago, so my memory is a bit fuzzy when it comes to exact details. My birth father, Spunk Donor, is an emotionally and mentally abusive prick with an almost legendary level of laziness. If it didn't benefit him or he didn't want it, it wasn't done. For instance, he complained if money was tight but refused to work due to a number of excuses. He could work, he just chose not to. He expected my mom to work to support the 3 of us, but also expected her to cook, clean, and cater to all of his needs. She eventually had enough, and my injuries were the catalyst for her to finally boot him out of our lives. This story takes place during the summer of 1997 at a state park. My mom's family is having a family get-together with games, grilling, you name it. Just days prior to this, my mom had gotten me a brand new 10-speed bike. This was my first 10-speed, and while I had an understanding of how to use it, I wasn't very sure of myself. Mom had told Spunk Donor to teach me how to ride and to make sure I was able to use it properly before I went out on my own. Spunk Donor said that he would, and she went off to help my aunts with getting the food ready. Spunk Donor, however, is feeling tired and wanted to relax in the shade, so he tells me to wing it and tells my cousin, who is a year older than me, to accompany me. It's important to note that my mom always insisted that I never go on a bike without a helmet. My cousin and I are riding on around, having fun, until we get to the top of a fairly steep hill. For context, we were riding on the paved roads in the park, and this park had its roads lined with wooden posts that are about a foot in diameter and are essentially logs that are jutting out from the ground. Cousin goes first, and I hesitate because this hill is enormous to my 11-year-old self. When she reaches the bottom of the hill, Cousin stops and turns to yell at me to come on, which I do. It doesn't take long for the bike to accelerate to an unsafe speed, and in my panic, I try to backpedal to slow my bike down, which obviously doesn't work. Last thing I remember, I'm barreling full speed towards Cousin and her bike. She was looking away at a nearby family and didn't notice me until it was too late. Next thing I know, I'm sitting in the grass a few feet away from the side of the road. A broken road post is laying a short distance in front of me. My right arm is hanging at a somewhat unnatural angle, and me, the post, and the grass are covered in millions of ants. I did what any kid in that situation would do. I started bawling for my mom. While I am having my meltdown, Cousin has picked herself and her bike up off the road. She, thankfully, escaped with only minor cuts and bruises, and came over to see what was happening with me. After seeing my arm, she told me to sit tight and took her bike back to the family campsite while me and the ants were still trying to process what the heck happened. A few minutes later, my mom and aunt, not Cousin's mother, pulled up Aunt's car to pick me up. Mom helped me into the car, brushing off as many ants as possible, and they took me to the park station so that they could call an ambulance. Along the way, my mom takes my helmet off so she can check for head injuries and notices that the foam insides of the helmet are almost completely shattered, even though the outside only looks slightly damaged. At the hospital, the staff takes x-rays and are baffled by what they find. My head is fine, but both my right collarbone and humerus are broken and my shoulder is dislocated. After this, the doctor takes my mom and aunt out of the room while another doctor starts asking me questions like, "Did someone do this to you?" and "Do your parents get angry a lot?" To which I said no. Meanwhile, the other doctor is asking my mom questions about her and spunk donor, causing her to immediately become irate. At the time, she was a social worker who worked with children in the foster care system, so she knows the routine when abuse is suspected. She tells him that no one is physically abusing me and insists that my injuries are due to a bike accident. The doctor is still skeptical, and it takes Aunt running out to her car to retrieve my battered helmet for him to realize that my mom is telling the truth. So, my arm is put into a cast that went from my wrist to over my shoulder, a process which involved more shenanigans, but this story is long enough, and my mom and I go home. After Aunt, my mom and I head toward the park station. Cousin and her parents retrieve my bike and tell everyone what's going on. After hearing this, Spunk Donor threw a ridiculously over-the-top tantrum, wailing about how his precious daughter had been hurt, blaming the bike and the company that made it, and ends his tirade by throwing the bike into a nearby tree. The bike, which had some minor damage from my accident, was completely mangled. He then jumps into his car and tears off to follow us, only to end up at the wrong hospital. After realizing his mistake, he drives to the correct hospital, only to be told that I have been discharged. He eventually makes his way back home, where I am asleep, thanks to some lovely pain medicine. My mom, at this point, was completely worn out from the day's events and was in no mood to deal with more BS. Once she tells him about what happened, he immediately starts tearing into her. Mom told me this some years later. He went on a rant about how I was irresponsible and at fault for riding down that hill when I should have known better. How it was my mom's fault that she didn't teach me how to ride the bike properly. how we made him look like a bad parent in front of my mom's family, and how we ruined his day by making him miss out on food and fun. My mom was livid. She immediately fired back about how he promised that he would teach me how to ride it, how he was always avoiding responsibility for things by blaming her for everything, and just lit into him about how he was a terrible father and husband. The fight ends with her throwing him out and telling him to never come back. They eventually divorced, but that was a whole nother tale of drama. There's a big difference between a father and a dad, and that guy barely deserves the father title, let alone the dad title. This is Rob from Karma Comic Chameleon saying thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe, like, and share the video with your friends, and we'll see you in the next one.